My days are marked by grace I don't deserve. No, you've been the price I can never pay. You've been the light that has led the way. No matter where I am, oh, I am sure there's never been a moment I was not held inside your arms. And there's never been a day when you were not who you say you are. You're forever, it don't matter what I'm walking through. 'Cause no matter where I'm going, there's never been a moment that I was not loved by you. Loved by you, loved by you. So where could I go that I could wander from your side? And where could I run and never leave behind? Your all-consuming, heart-pursuing, grace-extending, never-ending love. Your love. And there's never been a moment, no. There's never been a moment I was not held inside your arms. And there's never been a day when you were not who you say you are. You're forever, it don't matter what I'm walking through. 'Cause no matter where I'm going, there's never been a moment that I was not loved. Oh, no matter where I'm going, there's never been a moment that I was not loved by you. Yeah, loved by you. Loved by you. Loved by you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here at our round table. This afternoon, we're going to be reading from the book of Matthew. It is the 10th chapter, verses 40 through 42. And Jesus says, "Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward." This is the word of God. For the people of God, thanks be to God. This is the easy part of this chapter, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Since we're doing joy this month, I just picked the easy part. But you kind of got to look at the rest of it, really, to think about what Jesus is saying. You know, he's sending out the disciples, their first mission trip, as it were. And he tells them what to expect, what to take, what not to take, and mostly don't take anything. And what they can expect, and a lot of what they're going to expect was not a happy, right?
Yeah, it wasn't a great pep talk.
No.
You know, I feel like that if we were to line up your kids or when they were going to Blue Lake or kids going on a mission trip and you're like, okay, listen, this is going to be awful. You're not going to enjoy it, but know that in that suffering, I'm with you. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know if the kids would still come, you know, but
right.
I guess they do.
Who
I
would?
was thinking if Jesus was like planning a church in the modern day, this is like the worst recruitment strategy ever.
Yeah, right.
Come follow me, and this is all the stuff that's going to happen.
Yeah, yay.
You're going to have COVID, and they're going to, yeah.
Yeah, you may or may not be able to use the building. He kind of says that, though, too.
Yeah, yeah. Right. It is kind of scary to think of what they were going to face. And then, not only that, but then he says, and don't think I've come to bring peace to the world. I haven't come to bring peace, but a sword. Set man against his father, and daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And I thought, well, that happens a lot anyway. And one's foes will be members of one's own household. I mean, oh my goodness. Where is the family joy here? There's not one, you know. That's huge.
Well, to be honest, like I struggle with this one, with this part of it too, is because, it's part of what you feel like being an upright, or he's talking about speaking of righteousness and following him, but isn't honoring your father and mother part of that?
Yeah, it's one of the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, isn't loving your kids part of that? And I don't know if he's saying, like I said, it just feels contradictory to how I've experienced Christ, or what almost reason. And so I'm not really sure about the context here. Maybe it could be, I was thinking about anytime I get stuck in something like this, I'll always try to go back and think of, okay, what was the cultural context in first century Judea? Okay, is this a relevant topic in that context? So I don't know.
Well, if you think about the Jews, remember the blind guy that was healed, and his parents wouldn't even admit that he was healed because they didn't want to be kicked out of the temple, right? And so this is, if you choose Christ, you may be choosing to walk away from your family. In the last several months, I read a story about a Muslim young adult who became Christian and knew that when they made that commitment, they were losing all of their family. So I think that's what it's really saying. There's a choice sometimes you have to make. Not so much for us, but sometimes. My sister-in-law said, you can't be too religious. And that's when I was going to seminary. So there's still some of that.
Well, even then, he doesn't say, hey, sometimes this might be inconvenient. He says explicitly, don't think that I came to bring peace, or to there's a different, to the Greek, the translation was to cast. I like that word. Don't think that I came to cast peace on the earth. Well, I mean, we have a song about that. It's literally talking about peace on earth and
goodwill to men.
Goodwill toward men, and during the Christmas season. He said, I did not come to bring peace.
But he
a
also
sword."
said, my peace I leave with you.
Yeah.
My peace
Okay.
I give to you. It's not the
Yeah,
same.
so I think he brings peace for inside, because I think as hard as it is to walk away from family, that's a hurt that you experience. It's pretty dadgum deep, right? But the peace of Christ inside you gives you that and enables you to do it, and you've got to.
I think what you hear in this is that it's going to cost you something.
Right.
This is not just easy
Right.
peasy, everything pie in the sky. You're going to win $1 million and, what do you call it? Prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
No, it's going to cost you something. And I can remember, many years ago when I was doing lots of those Beth Moore studies, her saying that like her mother was like, did one of her studies and was like, what are you doing? You're becoming this religious fanatic. And
Jesus freaks. We used to be called those back in the day.
she said that was really hard for her to take that from her own mother,
Right, right.
So,
I mean, it happens today too. I mean, there's kids. I have kids at school that get ostracized here in Gulf Shores because they wear the shirts, or because they want to pray, and we think that being persecuted is a thing of the past, and we live down in the Bible Belt in Alabama. That is just not an accurate
it's
statement.
really sad. I can remember one particular leader many years ago when I first started, and boy, she was on fire big time, and I remember her calling me in tears one night because, teenage girls are going to get into it with their mother sometimes. But boy, her mother lit into her and told her she was becoming closed-minded and that she was not, she just, And I can tell you that profoundly influenced this girl, and she's a different person today, honestly, because anyway, that reminded me of that. But it does. He comes to bring a sword, you know.
We don't think about. You're talking about the joy. We're speaking of joy, and there's always two sides to that. And I talk to the kids about that. Is like the beauty danger paradox. Is like every beautiful thing that you experience in an unfiltered natural setting, there's an equally corresponding element of danger that belonging to it. And I feel that in this scripture here, where Jesus is talking about the way and the better way, but in making that choice, you need to understand that there's a balance to it, and there will be sacrifices. Not because I'm bestowing, not I'm saying I'm causing you to hurt, or I'm causing, but what I'm speaking, or what Jesus says he's speaking, is it's countercultural, it's revolutionary, it causes friction and tension, and people are going to. I mean, it happened today. I had a conversation with a kid last week whose parents don't want them coming to church anymore because they're changing. Well, I mean, that's kind of the point, right? Like that's one of the promises. They're reborn.
Right. And that is where you find your joy. Some of the books and articles that I read about church growth and bringing people into the church, if you make it easy, you get what you ask for, right? Oh, we don't expect anything from you. We're not going to get anything. But if we say, yeah, we expect you to be a disciple. We expect you to follow Christ. We expect you to serve Christ within the bounds of the church and in the ministries that we do outside the church. And we expect you to share of your blessings with the church so that we can bless others. The more we expect, the more, and the more you do. You all know this. The more joyful you are.
Absolutely.
It brings a joy, but at first it doesn't. I remember when I first started and I took a stewardship class, and this guy was like, "Yep, the first check I write every month is my check to the church, and it just makes me feel so good." And I'm like, "Oof, well, I write my tithe, but I haven't got to the good feeling part. I'm barely making it right now, and the tithe is really killing me. But I do it. But I understand that now more and more, and so yeah."
Well, how do you teach from all of us teachers in our whatever respective we've been I guess hired, if you will. Again, I feel like y'all could have made a better choice, but we will do what we will. That's what, called. Okay.
It's
But
God's choice.
yeah, it was. Oh, that's even scarier.
Yeah.
But in that is, how do you balance as a teacher, as a leader, a spiritual leader, knowing that, like, from our experience and what we know about the calling, Christ's calling, it's going to be difficult. But in that difficulty is a profound joy and peace that comes on the other side of the sword, with a culture that is genuinely centered around comfort and convenience.
What came to me when you were speaking was that, if you think about it in your own life, it's the Spirit rarely just leads us to places where we're comfortable. If we're going with God, I'm not saying that you're supposed to go, he's usually leading me out of my comfort zone in whatever
Not
way.
Not necessarily in misery, but
Right.
Yeah.
But
Something
it's
new.
for my own good though. And I had this image in my mind of the teenagers that, oh man, when I first started, it's like those years of kids that would go on that mission trip just got bigger and bigger, and they had to. Back in the day, we had to get up at 5 a.m, and you had to be at the work site at 6:15, and we worked our tails off, and they loved it, and it was because the Spirit was there with us working, and what God did on those trips, and I can't manufacture that, but that's what came to my mind when you were first speaking a while ago, and I thought, that's not us. But that was that group during that time, and for many years we did that. They were going with God, and they did some amazing work too. Like they built back in the day, they let them put roofs on houses and stuff. And well, we painted houses too, but yeah, man. And you slept on the floor. You got a cold shower, not a hot one, just one knob, cold.
Water,
You know,
no
in a
water.
trailer, and they're like, best trip ever, and oh.
They'll never forget it. And
I love those kids, but I did not love that stuff. But God has rarely led me to where I'm comfortable.
Right, right.
He's moving us on.
Yeah, I was coming down here to Gulf Shores a few years ago. I was like, this can't be right. You want me to come to the beach? Like, this is your calling for me? Not like Iraq or Palestine or, the Patagonia, but Gulf Shores, Alabama. And I wrestled with that for the sheer fact that I was going to a place that people wanted to go
Paradise.
That was your perception of it.
Yeah.
That was
Right.
your perception
Well,
of it.
to. Perception. But there's, and I think even down here we look at that and say, well, there's places of discomfort outside of, the Gulf Shores area, but there's genuine. That's not an accurate statement.
Well, and maybe that's your discomfort. You're not
Yeah.
in Iraq or
Exactly.
or
It's true.
you're not
Yeah.
in the woods.
I figured that
You're-
out
you're
last
in
year. I'm where
you're
it's
in
comfortable.
paradise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Laughter.
Yeah.
Peanut gallery back there.
Pipe down, peanut squad in the
Peanut
back.
gallery.
Well, and I remember telling someone when they were struggling with going in the ministry, and they knew they were called, but they just didn't want to do it because of all this, And I said, look, you're never going to be comfortable in your own skin until you follow God's call, and
it's so good.
and it's just true, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you need that peace. I'm reading this great book right now, which I can't recommend because it has a lot of bad words in it. But it talks about it does. But
You text
but
it to me?
But yes, it talks about your own self and how you get there, and it talks about a knowing, and she claims that the knowing is God, which is good. And I have a friend who uses that same expression, a knowing, and that's when she knows that God's leading her. I've got a knowing. I've got to call them, and so. But there is this. You've got to walk through the pain. You just have to. And when you try to avoid it, it just makes life worse.
Not around, but through.
That's right. That's right. So.
So there's one thing I wanted to. Dan didn't get a chance to say about it, but again that contradiction, because I have a hard time reading scripture. Like the immediate thought is, how can I translate this into the mind of a teenager? And I have to consciously think, okay, how's God talking to me? But with this one, is the hard road. But and I can feel the little questions of these 14-year-olds saying, but doesn't Jesus talk about his yoke being light and his burden easy? And then he comes in Matthew and talks about how it's hard. I mean, you had something about that.
Yeah, so the burden is different with Jesus, but it's the same burden, right? It's Dallas Willard who said, the yoke is a new piece of equipment. Nothing changes about the weight.
Yeah.
Life
that's
is
cool.
just as difficult, and it's going to be just as difficult under Jesus. But you got a partner, and he's walking the way with you. So his burden is easy. That yoke is light. We're going to carry it with him all the way. But read this. This is honesty. Like this is not feel good attractional church. This is Jesus in his realness. So this is the Jesus we need to talk about, right? Like his words to the disciples are our words, right? Before this, he says, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. I've been there.
Haven't we all?
Well, I've been there in my own soul, and I've been there talking to others, and it's just like if you serve with a kindergartner for once a month, not only is he going to help me, but it's going to change you so much. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. But that's the truth.
Yeah.
That's the truth, right? Being with Jesus and doing life in his way, in his kingdom, is the best life. So in the Sermon on the Mount, he models, he gives the best sermon ever, and he models the ethics of the kingdom. Like, this is what life is going to be like. And then for the next several chapters, he's doing healings. He's doing all the work. They're right beside him. At the end of 9, he sets him up. And then at 10, he knocks the pens down. This, I'm pushing you out of the nest. This is what it's going to be like. It's rough, but this is what's required.
And the yoke that they're not bearing anymore is the yoke of their own sin and trying to be perfect. You don't have to do this anymore. I'm carrying it for you, and I've borne the cross. But yes, it's your job to follow my call and what I have for you to share this with the world. That's the burden in my mind.
Yeah.
That's where he comes, like what you just said.
Well, I mean, life isn't easy. It's just not. But there's beauty in it. And like you say, Dan, the most profound experiences of beauty and joy and peace and happiness in my life has always come with that experience of it with Christ and through Christ. And being my age, like there's been times in my life where I haven't recognized. Now, Christ has never been away from me, but I've turned or not recognized God's presence in certain experiences, and there's just not that richness. There's just not that ability to see things. The joy is just not complete if it's outside of my full recognition of Christ's presence within it. And that makes so much sense when you're talking about the yoke, is that you're still carrying something. Like it's human nature. The burdens that we all carry, the stresses. I mean, you got, 9-year-olds being stressed out because they got to do schoolwork at home. Like stress exists at a young age. So that's not going to change. But what changes is one's ability to carry it fully and experience joy in the midst of it.
Right.
And that's Christ.
Right.
Every time, all day.
And with it, I would argue with this whole passage, this chapter, persecution and difficulty is not optional.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
2 Timothy 3:12 says it's not optional. Like you will experience persecution. And that's a word that has a negative connotation. I mean, when's the last time you felt persecuted?
Yeah.
I mean, so if we don't feel persecuted, does that mean we're doing something wrong?
Boom.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Look what these guys were willing to do, and we won't go knock on our neighbor's door and invite them over for coffee? Come on, y'all.
Yeah. Oh,
What-
no, it's with the kids in the home groups. It's like it's uncomfortable for them to go to somebody's house that they don't necessarily know. Like, have you not been listening? Like, discomfort's part of the equation. Like, that's guaranteed to be discomforting. But when you can embrace that and when you can recognize, I am not comfortable now, but there's a beauty that happens on the other side of my discomfort. And so I always, if you're comfortable, if you found a comfortable space in your life, or you found a comfortable, we talked about this a few weeks ago when we decided that Jeff and I brought on COVID through our prayers. When we were getting comfortable.
I'm still not over that either.
That's my bad. Sorry, Gulf Shores or whoever. But we were getting comfortable in our ministry. Like we've got a routine. It's like, uh-oh, like this isn't. And then we prayed for something.
That's what I love about you guys, because, like, just real talk right now,
Yeah.
it would be so easy. Where is he at? It would be so easy for you guys to coast.
Yeah.
It would be. And you'd still have great ministry and great students and great stuff. It would look great. But that's not who you are, right? You embrace that discomfort.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that about you.
Yeah, likewise, buddy. Thanks, man. Oh, okay, I'm done.
Or did you spiritually anticipate what was coming?
Oh, there goes Jules taking it deep. Oh man, I'm gonna have to sit with that one. I would never give myself that much credit. But I think that's true. I mean, in talking about this is the first time that they're being sent out, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, doesn't it come now? The road doesn't get easier, but you learn to be able to intuit the Spirit's almost intentions. I don't know if I'd like that word because this isn't scripted, but you learn and you grow and you learn to recognize that, okay, that rock in the road is one that I need to walk through that one, but this one I need to avoid, And so maybe in that walk with Christ, you begin to grow and learn, and the yoke becomes easier. But then also, like, the responsibilities also grow. So look at that.
Well, and when you make it over those rocks or through them, you have learned so much that you begin to. It helps you with the next rock.
You see the
right?
next rock's better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see them, and you sometimes you know how to at least tackle the first part of it, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I think it's good. It's hard, but it's that whole something that we need to remember is that when we share Christ with people and encourage them to become a follower, we need to be careful we don't say life is going to be fine. You know, once you become a follower of Christ, no more issues. You know, whatever you pray for is going to happen. That's just not right. You know, that's just not the way it is. But you will have that partner to walk with you and yoked with you, which is
And there's nothing like it.
that's right.
Like there's no way to describe that through words. You can't do it.
Mm-mm.
I love that. I think we've used it before, but C.S. Lewis is brilliant in metaphors, and with Aslan, is that this is a metaphor for Christ, and it's like they asked if is Aslan safe? And like, no, he's not safe,
Mm-mm.
but he is good.
He's good.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, I got chills on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sums
It's
this
not
text
safe,
up.
but it is good.
Right. And there's the joy, you
Yeah.
know. So. Yeah.
If I want to ask this. So, if someone's listening, or I'm reading this and studying this, and I'm thinking about my local context or what I'm doing, how do I take away? Let's say I've heard this and I'm all in. Yes, I want to live this type of life. Realistically, what does it look like? What does it look like for a young family? What does it look like for someone who's in retirement and enjoying their better years? What does it look like?
Well, I think for a young family, it means that you might have to give something else up in order to be a part of the ministry here at the church, right? It's not when you have time you're a part of the ministry, but that it's your priority. I was talking with someone yesterday about, well, I won't get into that part, but we accept things in our life, and we don't. And when I had children that were playing ball, they used to be no homework even on Wednesday nights, right? And then it got to be, then they started having ball practice on Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
And I used to say, if we'd all agree not to attend, then we could go back to our Wednesday nights at church. But your child has to suffer, and I didn't have any other support in my family group to make that stand. But those are the kind of things that we have to do is make a stand for what we are and not let other things come first. When you've committed to something in church but something else comes up, I'm not going to make it after all because, for the older adults, mostly they know that, but it's also music might need to change to reach new people. How we do worship. Fortunately, we have a wide variety so that we can reach a wide variety of people. So that's not as much of an issue here. But, I had churches in Dothan that they were, 10 people in their 80s, and they were desperate to get kids and youth and new people, but they were not willing to do anything different.
So maybe not that desperate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But, they thought they were desperate. But they weren't willing to do anything. Even just stop on the side of the road on their way home from church and talk to the people mowing their yard. So for the older adults, and not even just older adults, but people who've been in church all their lives that want, and I love tradition. You come to my house on Thanksgiving, you're going to get the same dishes every year because that's how I like it. But we got to change it up. We might need to have something besides broccoli casserole.
Well, and I think I don't like sometimes we lump like traditional service with the word tradition, and that and I don't necessarily feel like that's a fair placement of words, and I think that there's a call to difference. There's a call to newness, to rebirth, to being born again. When Jesus is talking to Nicodemus about it, but I found it in my experiences, that call, that change, that thing that you're talking about is so deeply unique, and you know it. those of us who have heard that voice of, okay, God's calling me to something, it is so loud when you open up and surrender to it. And you have to consciously push it aside. So when you say, how does that apply in one's life? And I think a lot of that is community and connecting with the church. But with me, it's always been, there's no doubt. There's never been any doubt when I say, okay, God, what do you need from me? Where are you calling me to? And it's like, can we do something else? Like, is there like plan
Why'd I
B
ask?
or like a second option? Yeah. It's like,
If you don't like the answer, you know it's God, right?
Exactly. If
Yeah,
you don't like
yeah.
it, if it makes you uncomfortable, or if and even calling you to comfort, making you uncomfortable by calling you to comfort. But how cool is that if my calling to come to a place that's comfortable made me uncomfortable, like that's so deeply personal. God doesn't need me, but he wants me to be a part of his kingdom.
Yeah, there's a saying, I mean, it can get trite, but I just still like it. It's, without God we can't, and without us God won't. And it's just really true, So,
Joy.
joy, joy.
What a joy.
Well, thank y'all. Thank you all for listening. And don't forget, in just a couple weeks after July 5th, so that'll be like the 8th of July. Yeah, July 8th, we'll begin having our roundtable at 6 o'clock, and we're inviting you to get a small group together and meet in your home with or without food and watch it together, and then have a time of discussion with the chapter. And what we'll do is we will let you know ahead of time what text that we will be using that week, so that you can look at it and think about it ahead of time as well. So again, thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye. See ya.